everyone, and welcome to another interview of Sonic Perspectives. My guest today is the one and only Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull. Ian, thank you for joining us.
Well, I am so far the one and only. Although there is another Ian Anderson who is a folk singer who originated around the same time as Jethro Tull began, and he was um, a little upset when another Ian Anderson came along
Oh,
on the
well.
same record label, the early Island Records, and he got a little upset when they terminated his contract and thought that I had something to do with getting him booted off the label, which of course I didn't. I had nothing to do with that. But yes, I'm not the only Ian Anderson in the world of music, but I'm the only Ian Anderson in terms of playing the flute and being the frontman of Jethro Tull. So hello, nice to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Well, you're about to release a new album, Curious Ruminant. While the Zealot Gene focused on human emotions and RökFlöte spoke about the Nordic mythology, the new one is quite varied in terms of concepts and themes, right?
It's a collection of songs, really,
Mhm.
from a number of different sources in terms of lyric writing. All the lyrics were written in May, late May, early June of last year, and the song titles, apart from one or two, were also very much part of last summer. So it was a big effort last summer to draw together some elements of some demos that I'd made some years ago with mostly with the members of the band who play with us today and on that album, the new album. But it's a collection of songs rather than a concept album, and the songs sit under that umbrella of being a little more personal, a bit more introspective, a bit more revealing of my own thoughts and impressions, and without making it an album of songs where I'm preaching to people or telling them what they should think. I am offering a little bit more of a personal insight into my own feelings and thoughts. There are more I's and me's in the lyrics than you would find in most other Jethro Tull albums.
Yeah. Well, on the title track, you combine René Descartes, Jung, and Freud reminiscing about existence. Can you talk a little bit about the concept of that one?
Well, the big questions of life, which are those that some people choose to avoid living as they do in a very materialistic world and a world where they don't really want to have to think too hard about the meaning of life. They want to enjoy what they have while they have it, and I can understand all of that. But I have, since I was a young teenager, always been interested in the big questions, questions of about religion, about the sense of who we are, why we are here. Are we just an accident of the gathering together of atoms and molecules and the gradual development of life, and the whole universe is some random explosion of cause and effect, or is there some more spiritual underlying reasoning that we might want to try to apply, even if there is no definitive clear-cut answer?
Yeah.
Of course, there is an answer if you were a religious devotee of any of the major religions. It's all written out for you in clear-cut terms in the Quran or in the Holy Bible. It's a manual, a user manual for life
Yeah.
and worship. But my own beliefs are a little more esoteric and don't really require a user manual, because I haven't come to any really firm conclusions. For me, it's a matter of continuing to learn and investigate and consider the world of possibilities and maybe probabilities, but whilst avoiding the certainties that come with being a religious devotee and entering into the state of ritual worship, which I'm not really ready for if I ever am. Having said that, I support the Christian church, being the one that I was vaguely born into, and I'm an activist within the Christian church in the sense that I raise money every year um, for the great churches and cathedrals, particularly in the UK, but sometimes elsewhere too, which would never be built in this present day. Buildings that are maybe 1,000 years old and have an architectural as well as a spiritual
Yeah.
magnificence. So I'm engaged in that for a few days every year. I'm a supporter of the Christian church, but I don't call myself a Christian with a capital C.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah. Well, tell me about Tipu House, where you tell the tale of a struggling urban community, but there's also hope for growth and richness and a better life.
Well, a lot of people who are successful in life will claim to have very humble origins, whether they're true or whether they're slightly exaggerating because it makes them seem more of the people, or perhaps that they have risen in the face of great adversity to be successful, whatever success might mean.
Mm.
But in general, I think you can look upon a lot of world figures in historical terms as well as today who have genuinely come from humble origins to achieve in their particular chosen field levels of greatness that serve as an example to everybody else that diligence, hard work, effort, commitment, and a degree of good luck may come together
Yeah.
to allow you to become, in your own mind and perhaps in the minds of other people, somebody successful
Yeah.
and great.
Yeah.
And that applies whether you're a football player or a captain of industry or a leading politician in some places, or perhaps a guitar player in a rock band. You can succeed, and it's nice to be reminded of where those origins lie. And quite often when I'm traveling and walking around cities, I see places where people live, and they're maybe not really very salubrious. They're ugly buildings covered in graffiti with children playing in the dirt outside, but maybe in some of those are the heroes and the notable citizens of tomorrow.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah. Well, I have to ask you about my favorite song of the album, Drink from the Same Well. More than 15 glorious minutes and a duel between flutes. I love how one flute feeds off the other in the instrumental sections of the song. Tell me about that one.
Well, it began as a demo I recorded back in 2007 with our then keyboard player Andrew Giddings. We
Mm.
recorded a piece that I'd written as a demo to send to Hari Prasad Chaurasia, the Indian classical flautist with whom we had some upcoming concerts in India. And he chose not to do that piece of music, wanted to play a traditional Indian raga instead. So the demo just sat there gathering dust until my son came upon it last May and said, "Oh, I just found this on a computer I was about to destroy. And I thought I'd just check through the contents before I do that. Do you want to keep this or shall I delete it?"
Mm.
So I said, "Send it to me. I don't remember anything about that." And when he did and I heard it, I immediately recalled doing it. And it had a working title of Drink from the Same Well, applicable to the idea of East and West coming together musically and
Right.
sharing in something as a musical experience, which was behind the effort to write that demo for Hari Prasad and the members of Jethro Tull. So it seemed like a something very worthwhile to keep in the real world and give people a chance to hear. I was very proud of my flute playing, particularly the demo of the bamboo flute, which was quite tricky. I mean, it's quite difficult to play.
I bet. Yeah.
And so the first thing I did, I took the title, Drink from the Same Well, and wrote some lyrics.
Mm.
And then I re-recorded um, much of the flute and added guitar, acoustic guitar, electric guitar, bass, drums, cajon, and and kept Andy's original keyboard parts because he seemingly doesn't really play keyboards any longer or do any, he's not really active in music as far as I can make out. Last time I saw him, he seemed to be dodging the question of what he was doing musically. So I assume he's not really very active, and so I thought, well, I'll just keep what he did, which was great,
Mhm.
and and then re-record the rest. So it finally found the light of day as a largely new recording, but based upon that original demo.
Yeah, excellent. Well, and have you released now three albums in the span of 4 years, not even counting the reissues, but it's the busiest the band has been since the 70s. And also, you recently worked with Opeth on their album, The Last Will and Testament. It's almost like you're trying to prove a point in this day and age. Am I right in saying that? Or
Not really, no. I mean,
yeah,
I'm usually busy, and over the last 10, 20 years, I've been working, releasing solo albums and all the reissues and compilations and surround sound mixes and so on and so forth of classic Tull material from before. So I'm always busy.
mm,
And I play on other people's records quite frequently when they ask me to, give them a little bit of a fluty helping hand, and I'm doing that. So,
right.
I'm always busy. It's not a particularly revolutionary time. It just happens to be that since 2022, 2023, there were new Jethro Tull albums, and last year I recorded a new Jethro Tull album, although it had to wait until this year to be released. But
Yeah,
I'm not. It's not as if I'm particularly busy or infused with some new level of energy and enthusiasm for recording. It just happens that way. But if you'd asked me last April,
mm,
do you have plans for a new album? I would have said no.
right,
I don't have anything. And then if you'd asked me a month later, I would have said yes. I'm half. I'm beginning. I'm recording. I'm in the middle of making a new record.
right,
So if you ask me now, what plans do I have for a new album? I'm afraid I'm going to scratch my head and say, well, I don't have any.
right.
But who knows? A month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, there might be another album. But it,
Yeah,
it just it will happen when the time is right. Not because you set a specific diary date, although there's something challenging about doing that. And I have done it a few times when I've set a diary date for beginning to work on a new album. But
right.
I think by and large, it's probably better to wait until the muse visits and you are blessed with that moment where you have the beginnings of something new, which is very exciting and energizing in its own way without you having to work too hard to achieve it. It just the time is right and it's good to get on with it.
Yeah,
It's a bit like sex, really, come to
yeah,
think of it.
absolutely. Yeah. And well, speaking of the reissues, some of your albums like A and Under Wraps were not what the fans expected at the time, and they gather a lot of criticism. Do you think with the reissues, the fans will see those albums in a different light this time, or
Well, they might reevaluate them, but I don't
yeah,
think if you're intrinsically opposed to those particular songs or
mm,
the musical style, then nothing's going to change. But um, I would think that generally the process is one where people are brought into it a little more and perhaps feel better about it in the light of remixing and reworking than they did at the time.
yeah,
And of course, they're all part of the big catalogue, the big repertoire of Jethro Tull music, and Under Wraps, which will be in the next couple of years, will be the subject of a reissue and a reworking and a replacement of the original drum machine, then hopefully it'll make a little more sense, and through the ears of independent remixers, it might take on a slightly different feel to the original,
yeah,
and that's good. I haven't spoken to Bruce Seward from the Pineapple Thief, who's done a lot of remixing and surround sound mixing for us. I haven't spoken to Stephen Wilson, who's done a lot of other stuff, or Jacko Jacksig, who's done some mixing for me. I haven't spoken to any of them about Under Wraps, but
okay,
it's a good chance that someone's going to say, "Yeah, I'll give that a go."
right. Fingers crossed.
Mm.
Yeah. And well, I know this has been asked many times, but I could not ask you about Tony Iommi, who was part of Jethro Tull for a millisecond. Did you guys remain in contact through the years, and could you maybe have collaborated in any capacity with him?
Well, Tony is a very idiosyncratic guitar player, one
Mm,
who when I first met him, had a very distinctive style. And it was appealing to me because it was very direct and very, it was a very tuneful hard rock when I first heard him playing with a band that supported Jethro Tull back in 1968, a group called Earth, who then
Right.
subsequently changed their name to Black Sabbath. And Tony's musical style came very much from a physical injury that he suffered in his youth working in a factory and had the tips taken off a couple of fingers. And so he wasn't able to play guitar in a more conventional way, using all of his fingers to play six strings chord shapes, for example. He found that very difficult. And but he, we got together and played around for a couple of days in the studio, and it wasn't going to work out for him or for us as a permanent replacement, although he did come back a few weeks later to mime the guitar playing of a song for Jeffrey on the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus
Oh,
television
wow. Yeah.
program. But Tony and I have been, good friends, and occasionally we bump into each other, and
Mhm.
we exchange Christmas cards every year, and he's in, I think, in good shape, sounds cheerful and upbeat, and hopefully
Yeah.
now that they have, as it is reported, a concert taking place, the final ever Black Sabbath concert and the final ever performance from Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something I suppose that will bring together those latent forces that have been for a while not about. I never actually saw Black Sabbath play until the
That's
second
a
last concert that they played a few years ago on tour in the UK, and I went to see that, and it was the first time I'd actually sat through a Black Sabbath concert. I mean, it wasn't all the original guys because they had a different drummer at that
yeah.
point, but
Yeah.
they were. Um, with the aid of modern technology and video and production, it was a good show, and I think particularly showcased Tony Iommi's ongoing, very solid contribution to the band and its music, because it's not only idiosyncratic, but it's very fine guitar playing and very fine music writing and arranging too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, last question for me, and then we talk about touring and we wrap it up. But you influenced a lot of metal bands. Iron Maiden covered Cross-Eyed Mary, Overkill did Hymn 43, and there's a few others. But what went through your mind when you first heard these versions, and to what do you credit that such an influence from a band that has nothing to do with metal with such heavy acts?
Well, two possible reasons. One is that some of Jethro Tull's music does classify, I suppose, as hard rock. I mean, there are elements of our repertoire over the years that are quite raucous and loud and forceful songs like Cross-Eyed Mary, or, I mean, at
Yeah.
various points along the way, there are quite heavy rock songs,
Yeah.
but it definitely doesn't make up the bulk of our music. It's a lot more eclectic, the Jethro Tull repertoire. So one of the reasons is, yes, some of the music is heavy rock and might appeal to some of the bands you've mentioned or might think of mentioning. The other reason is that perhaps in the heaviest of metal bands and performers and songwriters, there lurks a more sensitive soul who would like to do things that are a bit more thoughtful and maybe emotional in a different way.
Yeah.
So there are, for example, in Iron Maiden, I mean, apart from Bruce Dickinson, who is essentially quite an eclectic kind of a guy, likes a lot of different things,
Yeah.
but also within the other members of that band, there are guys who are kind of quite like Jethro Tull, because I suppose we do something and we're able to do something and be successful doing something that perhaps they would rather like to do, except that maybe they feel their fans wouldn't accept that kind of rather more gentle approach to music. And so a lot of bands, whoever they might be, they've made their heavy metal bed and they have to lie in it because that's what is expected of them. But
Yeah.
I think in a lot of cases they probably would rather like to do a gentle piece of acoustic music, and maybe that's part of the allure of a band like us, that we kind of do both of the extremes and all points in between.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Well, and yeah, and speaking of touring, there's a few dates in Europe already booked. I think until November or December. I'm in Toronto, Canada. Are you planning to visit North America anytime soon?
Well, rather like asking me if I have plans for a new album. No, I don't have any plans at the moment. We'll just see how things pan out, but I'm pretty much committed in 2025 to shows in the UK and Europe, and so 2026 we're just beginning to start to put in some shows in that year. So we'll see what happens. But no, I don't have any plans at the moment. It's
Fair
I
enough.
have to,
Yeah.
I've always rather liked um, Canada, and perhaps we should visit again before it becomes another US state.
Yeah, you better hurry.
If Mr. Trump has his way.
Yeah, yeah,
But no, Canada has a long association with the UK as it does with France, and
yeah,
so we do feel a kind of a kinship, and certain parts of Canada being favorites of mine to visit. I mean, I do like the Northeast.
right.
I suppose the further west you go, um, the more the more you enter cattle country and something a little bit more American. But
Yes.
you know,
Yeah,
from the more traditionally European parts of Canada, I feel always a sense of being in Europe, particularly in Quebec or
Quebec.
Ottawa.
Yeah,
I'm very, very fond of the architecture and the history, and the fact that I can still read a restaurant menu even if it's in French. Anyway, very nice
excellent.
to talk to you. Have to get
Likewise.
on with the next one now, so take care.
Thank you, Ian. Have a good one.
All
Bye.
right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye now.